I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Vietnam Veterans News Podcast. News of interest about Vietnam veterans from a Vietnam veteran. Now, here's your host, Mac Payne.
This is Mac Payne here with episode 1774 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. News about the Vietnam War and the brave veterans who served there, as told to you by yours truly, a Vietnam veteran. If you've listened to any of the previous 1,773 episodes of this podcast, you probably are well aware that one of the primary things I do on this podcast is extol the reputation of members of the great Vietnam veteran generation, one as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. I will be doing that again in this episode, telling you about another very, very interesting Vietnam veteran and what he's done since he left Vietnam. He was a Marine in Vietnam, working out of Chu Lai. He was in the aviation branch of the Marines, but he still had some interesting stories to tell. He wrote a book about it called 5150 the Book. I encourage you to get a copy of it. You're going to find out that this particular Vietnam veteran by the name of Ron Irwin is a very interesting person and has led a very interesting life. The title of this episode is Meet Vietnam Veteran Ron Irwin, lawyer, author, artist, and public relations pro. Currently, he's living out in the Los Angeles area, specifically Burbank, where many of the TV programs are located. Ron Irwin, who is from Illinois, left home at age 11, meaning he ran away from home. Later, he joined the Marines when he was 17, and as he says in his own words, at the age of 18, he found himself in Asia, which was exactly where he wanted to be. The military took care of him over there and put him in a place where he did want to be. He's done some very interesting things. When he got back from Vietnam, he went to law school, graduated law school, and passed the Illinois bar exam. That tells you one thing. Ron Irwin is no dummy, if he can do that. He practiced law for a little while and then said, "That's it. I'm getting out of here." He packed his bags and moved down to L.A., eventually becoming a radio talk show host. Then he got into public relations. There was a story about him that appeared in no less than the Gilmer Mirror online website. Gilmer is a town in East Texas, not too far from Longview. Apparently, the Gilmer Mirror picked up this press release that Ron put out because Ron has a very special project going on. Not only does he write books, but he is also in the process of trying to get one of his books made into a movie. Being located in Los Angeles is a real good place to be if that's what you are trying to do. That's going to be covered in this story, which I'm going to share with you. We're going to find out just how good a PR man Ron Irwin is. That'll be determined by whether or not you're willing to help him in this movie project. The title of the story that appeared on the Gilmer Mirror online website is "You Are Invited on a Great Journey." Naturally, it was submitted by Ron Irwin himself because that's one of the things he does. He writes. Let's take a look at what Ron has to say about his career and this big-time project that he is pursuing. Dateline, Gilmer, Texas. Here it is in Ron Irwin's own words. For far more years than I care to admit, I have been writing about all manner of things, from plays and movie reviews to fantastic travel adventures and more. But today, I'd like to share with you a brand new adventure I just started, and I extend to you an offer to join me on this journey. It all began back in 1966. In early 1966, I began a 13-month tour of duty as a young Marine in Vietnam. Although a Marine, I was an aviation Marine and not infantry, and for that I am happy because our infantry Marines suffered far more than us Air Wing Marines. Nevertheless, ours was not exactly a happy time either. I, along with many other Marines and Army soldiers, sailors, and airmen, all played a role in the conflict that by the mid-1960s was full of rage. Over my 13-month tour, I had a wide variety of experiences ranging from hilarious to severely frightening. I think most Vietnam veterans could agree with that statement. Continuing. But after 13 months, I was ready to leave both Vietnam and the Marine Corps. With only 3 days left, I had the opportunity to ask a Marine general why we were in Vietnam. His answer stunned me like I have before or since been stunned. He does not go into what the general said was the reason we were in Vietnam. Must have been something because he was stunned. Continuing. Then, with only 1 day left in Vietnam, I found myself in a very unique situation where I shared a cold beer with 2 enemy soldiers. Clearly, it was time for me to leave. I came home and struggled a bit to build a life. Eventually, I went to law school and got my law degree and then passed the bar exam and became a courtroom warrior. That lasted about 10 years before I packed up and moved to California, where I decided to never again take another bar exam, so I began a career as a radio talk show host and publicist. It was a lot more fun and paid way better than being a Marine corporal in Vietnam. But then one day, a few years back, I went to the air show at the Marine Corps Air Station Miramar. My memories of Vietnam had been deeply suppressed right up until that day. It began by those of us in attendance who had served in Vietnam receiving a special commendation from the commanding officer. That was nice, but as we left the hangar, my eyes became riveted upon an A-4 Skyhawk jet. The last time I had seen that very airplane was in Chu Lai, Vietnam. Suddenly, like a tidal wave of ice water, it all came rushing back. By the time I got home a few hours later, I started writing a book. Within just a few days, I had it written. Not too long, only about 148 pages. And unlike so many other books about war, there is very little, if any, great tales of heroics. But there is an abundance of revelations of utter insanity that dominated my experiences in Vietnam. That sounds pretty normal to me. Continuing. That reality led me to the ultimate name I gave the book. It was and is 5150 the book. 5150 is police code for crazy, and it just seemed so appropriate. Should you want to enjoy this crazy book, it is inexpensive and available here. He gives a link that is too long for me to repeat, but don't worry, it will be on the show notes for this podcast episode number 1774 over at the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com. I advise you to go over there, pick up a copy of that book. I have not read it, but after getting to know more about Ron Irwin, I think it would be a very interesting read, especially in these times where you may have a little time on your hands. Continuing with Ron's presser. And as I said, I have written many reviews of stage plays and movies, and one day recently it occurred to me that 5150, the book, could be a truly great movie. So I began putting together a team to begin working on the project. Already on board, I am pleased to have multi-award-winning producer-director Richard Greenwood Jr., as well as Kirk Taylor from the great movie Full Metal Jacket. As we continue to build our team, we are focusing on first producing a short 10 to 15-minute pitch piece we can use to get the needed interest to fund a full feature production. And to help get this first phase done as soon as possible, we have posted a GoFundMe page. Again, It's one of those mile-long URLs I'm not going to read, but I am going to put it over on the podcast website in episode 1774. If you're interested, go over there and check it out. Imagine how exciting that could be. You participate in the production of a Vietnam War movie. Continuing. Also, I am happy to tell you that we have also just pledged to donate 10% of the net profits from this project to the Semper Fi charity, one of the best in our nation to provide help to military and former military men and women in need. And if you have questions, thoughts, or comments you wish to share with me, Ron Irwin, please send an email to burbankpilot@gmail.com. That email address will also be on the show notes. There will be another link on there that will give you some additional information about Ron Irwin. Ron's a very interesting guy. I encourage you to go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, and look at a picture of Ron there in episode 1774. You can see he's a very interesting guy. It's kind of interesting how he got in the public relations business. He was hosting his talk show there in Burbank. Whenever you're a talk show host, one of your biggest challenges, in addition to getting sponsors, is to find someone out there interesting enough to come on your program and get people to listen. And apparently the way it goes out there in Los Angeles is you got to know somebody to know somebody. He knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who worked for none other than Mel Gibson, who had just returned from Australia, where he was making a movie. Lo and behold, he got Mel to come on his show. The rest is history with Ron Irwin. That's why I wanted to tell you about Ron's project. If you would like to help him get a movie produced based on his book, 5150, the book, please go over to the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com, and click on that site. I guarantee you he would greatly appreciate it. That's the story of another Vietnam veteran and what he is doing. I think Ron Irwin does a pretty good job of helping me verify the fact that the Vietnam veteran generation is as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from its country. Thank you very much, Ron Irwin. I wish you the best on your upcoming movie project, and I'll be one of the first ones to go watch it at the local theater, if they ever open them up again. If not, I'll look forward to seeing it either on Netflix or Vudu. Doesn't matter how you see it, just see it. Ron Irwin, I thank you very much. I am so impressed with what you've done with your life in Vietnam and afterwards. I am hereby issuing you an official Vietnam Veteran News Podcast salute for your service to your country. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. This is Mac Payne closing out episode 1774 of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You are cordially invited to return again soon and often to listen to more that will be coming your way on this podcast, the Vietnam Veteran News.
How about that? Ain't that a mess?